welcome to today's lecture where we introduce rationalism. So we are looking at this branch of philosophy referred to as epistemology. It's the branch where we look at questions about knowledge. And in particular, last week we started asking this question: well, how can we justify knowing something? The solution or the approach we looked at last week was referred to as empiricism. We can justify what we know because we experience it. How do we know that there is a computer in front of us right now? I see it in front of me right now. How do you know that you are listening to a lecture on empiricism? Because I heard the instructor just say that we're talking about empiricism. This justification of knowledge based upon sense experience seems pretty intuitive for a lot of us, and it's how we often justify knowing something. However, we noted last week that there are some problems that you'd have to address if you're an empiricist. One is that our perceptions can be misleading. We often experience things that are not necessarily true of reality, whether it's hearing intruders in the house when it's just a creaking floor, or seeing mirages in the desert, or seeing pencils or straws that look bent into cups of water. Our sense perceptions seem to deceive us. And beyond that, an idealist philosophy, another branch of empiricism, brings to light the question of whether or not we're actually experiencing some sort of external material reality. So while you're staring at this computer screen and you believe you are sensing a computer that is in front of you, do you ever really experience a computer that's in front of you? Bishop Berkeley notes that, well, I mean, you really only experience the ideas in your own mind. You only really experience the sensations in your own head. So how can we ever make a claim about some sort of external objective reality? And therefore, how can we ever say we ever know something about objective reality? Another problem is that if we take a look at something like science, which seemingly is founded on empiricism, well, science uses inductive sorts of analysis. They do tests, and then based upon the tests, they come to generalized statements about reality. This is referred to as induction. However, we notice that empiricism has an issue, or can be is problematic when it comes to induction, because inductive statements make generalized statements about reality. Because of the few tests we ran on this vaccine, we can come to the conclusion that this vaccine will be useful or will work for a majority of people. Well, unless you test it on the majority of people, we can't really justify that statement empirically, right? This is the problem of induction. We can't make any generalized statements because we don't experience all of something. Third problem, well, it's a problem of causation. Many of us have this intuitive sense that events have causes in them. And when we take a look at scientific knowledge, it's kind of based upon the idea that events have causes to them. Hence, the scientific endeavor is about, well, looking for the causes of certain events. So that when you have an ailment, we try to find out what the cause is so that we can give a solution. When there is an issue with the environment, well, what's the cause of it? So we can find a way to solve the issues with the environment. So the scientific endeavor seems to also rely on the belief in the law of cause and effect. But if you're an empiricist, this can be problematic because you never really see causes and effects. You just see events followed by events. So, how else can we justify knowledge? How else can we justify knowing something if there are so many problems with empiricism? Well, recall we learned about Plato's cave way back in week one, and Plato back then warned us that our lives are like being trapped in a cave where we believe our experience of shadows on the wall of a cave and mistake those shadows for the reality that those shadows represent. Here we already see Plato telling us to doubt our senses, to doubt our experience. And he says that there's something beyond this cave, that there is a more real world outside. And it's in this real world that exists real truths, that exists reality. So we refer to this as a divided line, right? Where beyond our world of form, or so I'm sorry, beyond our world of material experience, sensory experience, which is always changing, there exists something beyond that. There exists forms which are the most real, which are the most true, which are never changing, and they exist in this immaterial realm beyond the one we believe we are living in, beyond this physical realm. So, how do we access that realm of forms? How do we access experiencing these truths, if not in our caves? Well, if you remember, we have a similar sort of story with Descartes and how he tried to pursue certainties. Descartes wanted to find out things that he could know for sure, so he began to tear down what he thought he knew. Anytime he came to a belief that he thought could be doubted, he would throw it away. The hope is that after demolishing all that he could doubt, he would only be left with those truths that he knew for sure. And it is based upon those certainties that you could slowly then build up your house of knowledge, because then you have it set on a solid foundation and not one that can crumble. Notice here too that Descartes gave us a reason to doubt our sensory experiences. He tells us that even when we dream, right, we are fooled by our senses, so why even believe them when we are awake? So, how did he come to his certainties? How did he come to his first truth? Well, the answer to both questions are the same. When we ask, how do we experience this ideal realm of forms? How do we access that? How do we get to certainties that we can know for sure? Well, we use reason. We think. Rationalism is the approach to justifying knowledge where we use our intellect to rationally, logically think about what can and cannot be true. Now, classically speaking, or I'm sorry, before that, knowledge in this case can be gained then a priori. Knowledge in this case can be gained prior to experience. So when we take a look at that term, a priori, prior, before, rationalism has this belief then that you don't have to experience the world first in order to fill up your blank slate in order to gain knowledge. That knowledge can be gained prior to you having the experience of reality by reflection, by the intellect. Classically, as we take a look at what Plato showed us and what we see with Descartes, classically, rationalism then often is seen as having these characteristics. One is that there's a belief that true knowledge, that any sort of true knowledge, is something that must be certain, is something that doesn't change. Otherwise, you can't really say you know it, right? The definition of knowing something here for the rationalist is that you know something that isn't doesn't change. It's how it is. Two, that appearances and sensory perception is inherently untrustworthy. And then three, that reason may be the best and maybe only real, true path to knowledge. So this week we'll take a look at why. Why do rationalists believe this? How does rationalism solve some of the issues we saw with empiricism? And then later on, after that, we'll discuss some issues with rationalism as well.